The conference room fell silent when Marcus Sterling called my name. I stood from my seat in the back corner, clutching the portfolio that represented 6 months of my life. My palms were sweating, but I forced myself to walk steadily toward the front where the entire board sat waiting. Before I reached the podium, Marcus grabbed the microphone and laughed. It wasn't a friendly laugh. It was the kind that made everyone else uncomfortable enough to join in. "Let's be real for a second," he announced to the room of 50 employees and donors. "We all know who actually carries this department, and who just takes up space." The laughter grew louder. I felt my stomach drop. He snatched my portfolio from my hands and flipped through it carelessly. "This is what you spent half a year on. This garbage." He tossed it onto the floor. Papers scattered everywhere. "Sit down, kid. You're embarrassing yourself." My face burned hot. My vision blurred at the edges. Every eye in that room was on me, watching me fail. Some people looked away in pity. Others smirked. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I didn't run out crying. I bent down slowly, gathered every single page, and smiled at him. "You're absolutely right," I said clearly. His smile faltered for just a second. I walked back to my seat while whispers erupted around me. After that meeting, everything changed. My name became a punchline in the hallways. People who used to greet me now looked past me. The few who still talked to me did so with pity in their voices. "You should just keep your head down now," my desk neighbor Kyle Harrison whispered one morning. "Marcus doesn't forget when someone challenges him." I nodded and said nothing. Within a week, I was removed from every important project. My calendar cleared out as meeting invitations disappeared. The work they gave me was basic, mindless, the kind of tasks they assigned to interns. Filing, data entry, coffee runs. I accepted everything without complaint. I arrived an hour early every morning. I stayed 2 hours late every evening. I never questioned a single assignment, no matter how ridiculous. They thought I had given up. They thought I had learned my lesson. That's exactly what I wanted them to think. When people believe you're beaten, they stop watching you carefully. They stop guarding their words around you. They forget you're even there. I became invisible, and invisible people see everything. The humiliation followed me home like a shadow. My family heard about it before I could tell them myself. Small towns and tight communities spread news faster than wildfire. My father, Thomas, barely looked up from his newspaper when I walked in that evening. "Heard you had a rough day at work." "That's one way to put it," I muttered. My older brother, Andrew, was less subtle. "Maybe you're just not cut out for that kind of work. Not everyone can handle corporate pressure." My mother touched my shoulder gently but said nothing. Her silence hurt worse than Andrew's words. I didn't defend myself. I didn't explain what really happened. I just said, "They probably know what's best." That answer seemed to satisfy everyone. They stopped asking questions. Inside, though, I was perfectly calm. Because I had already made my decision. Giving people what they want doesn't always mean surrendering. Sometimes it means buying yourself time and space to work without interference. They wanted me quiet and defeated. I would give them exactly that performance while I figured out my next move. Hello everyone, and thank you for being here. Before the story continues, take a second to tell me where you're watching from in the comments. Here we share true-to-life revenge stories where the ignored, humiliated, and betrayed rise quietly, and make it count. I truly enjoy seeing how far these stories travel and hearing from you directly. One important note: some elements in this story have been fictionalized for educational and storytelling purposes, and any resemblance to real people or settings is coincidental. That being said, the message I'm sharing is meaningful, and I hope it speaks to you. Weeks crawled by slowly. The department started having problems. Small ones at first, then bigger. A deadline was missed because nobody had organized the files properly. Client presentation went wrong because the data was incomplete. Budget reports didn't match up. Nobody asked for my help. Marcus and his inner circle were too proud to admit they needed the person they had publicly humiliated. I watched it all happen and said nothing. Instead, I kept records. I saved every email that came through my inbox, even the ones that seemed unimportant. I documented every conversation I overheard. I noted every date and time when something went wrong. I never offered suggestions. I never pointed out mistakes. I just watched and recorded while the problems piled up higher and higher. My coworkers started complaining more openly. "It's like everything's falling apart," someone said in the break room. "Nothing runs smoothly anymore." I sipped my coffee and stayed quiet. They had wanted me gone. Now they were getting a taste of what that actually meant. One evening I was finishing some basic filing work when I noticed something unusual. Someone had left a secure folder open on the shared network drive. It was labeled, "Internal Review, Confidential." My cursor hovered over it. I knew I shouldn't look, but something made me click. Inside were documents that made my blood run cold. Budget reallocations that didn't match the public reports. Donor funds redirected to personal accounts. Meeting notes discussing how to hide discrepancies from auditors. Marcus Sterling's name was all over everything. I didn't download the files. That would leave a digital trail. I didn't print anything. That would require me to use my access card at the printer. Instead, I read everything carefully. I memorized names, dates, and amounts. I took mental notes of which board members were involved and which ones were being kept in the dark. Then I closed the folder and went back to my filing work as if nothing had happened. 3 weeks later, the annual stakeholder meeting was announced. It would be bigger than the last one. More donors, more community leaders, more press coverage. Marcus Sterling spent days preparing his presentation. He wanted it perfect. He wanted to show everyone how successful the department had become under his leadership. I heard him practicing his speech in his office. He talked about growth and transparency and accountability. The words sounded hollow when I remembered what I had seen in those files. He had no idea what I knew. He had no idea what was coming. Because I had spent those 3 weeks very carefully, very quietly, making sure the right people would ask the right questions at exactly the right time. The night before the stakeholder meeting, I lay awake staring at my ceiling. Not because I was nervous. Not because I was afraid. I was awake because I was absolutely certain of what was about to happen. I had spent months being careful. Months being patient. Months giving them exactly what they wanted so they would never suspect what I was really doing. Tomorrow, all of that patience would finally pay off. I got out of bed at 4 in the morning and got ready. I put on my best suit, the one I had been saving. I reviewed my notes one final time, then destroyed them. Everything I needed was already memorized. By the time the sun rose, I was ready. The presentation hall was packed. Every seat was filled and people lined the walls. The lighting was bright, almost harsh. Cameras were set up to record everything. Marcus Sterling stood at the podium looking confident, almost smug. He wore his best suit and his practiced smile. He had no idea his career was about to end. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice smooth and professional. "I'm excited to share the incredible progress we've made this year." He clicked through his slides, talking about increased revenue and improved efficiency. The numbers looked impressive if you didn't know they were false. People nodded along. Some took notes. Everyone seemed satisfied with what they were hearing. I sat in the same back corner where I had been humiliated months earlier. My hands were steady now. My heart beat calmly. I just waited. 5 minutes into Marcus's presentation, a board member named Howard Phillips raised his hand. "Marcus, these revenue numbers. Can you break down exactly where this growth came from?" It was a simple question. The kind Marcus should have been prepared for. But I had spent weeks making sure Howard would notice specific discrepancies in the reports. I had carefully left certain documents where he would find them. I had asked innocent-sounding questions that planted seeds of doubt. Marcus stumbled slightly. "Well, Howard, it came from various streams. Increased donations, grant money, program fees. Can you specify the percentages?" Howard pressed. Marcus's smile tightened. I don't have those exact figures with me right now. Another board member, Catherine Brooks, spoke up. The grant money especially. Which grants specifically? The room's energy shifted. People sat up straighter. The cameras kept rolling. Marcus tried to regain control, but more questions came. Each one was harder to answer than the last. His prepared presentation crumbled as board members demanded details he couldn't provide. The Westfield Foundation grant, someone asked. That was for $30,000, correct? Yes, Marcus said. But the program it funded only shows expenses of $18,000. Where's the remaining $12,000? Marcus's face reddened. There were administrative costs. $12,000 in administrative costs. Catherine's voice was sharp now. That seems excessive. I remained silent in my corner, but inside I felt calm satisfaction. Every question they were asking was one I had carefully prepared them to ask. Every discrepancy they noticed was one I had subtly pointed them toward over the past 3 weeks. Marcus looked desperately around the room. His eyes landed on me for a brief second. I saw the first flicker of understanding cross his face. Perhaps we should hear from the rest of the team, Howard suggested. Get a fuller picture of the department's operations. Marcus's jaw clenched. I don't think that's necessary. I disagree, Catherine said firmly. She looked directly at me. You there in the back. You work in this department, correct? Everyone turned to stare at me. The same people who had watched me get humiliated months ago. I stood slowly and walked to the front. This time nobody laughed. The room was completely silent. Yes, ma'am, I said clearly. I've worked here for 3 years. Can you explain these budget discrepancies we're noticing? She asked. Took a breath. This was the moment I had been working toward for months. I spoke calmly and clearly. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make accusations. I simply presented facts. The Westfield grant was designated for our youth mentorship program. I began. The program budget I filed showed projected costs of $17,500. The actual spending was $18,200, well within normal variance. Pulled out a folder. Inside were copies of every document I had carefully preserved. However, the internal financial report shows $30,000 allocated to that program. The additional $12,000 was classified as administrative overhead, but there's no documentation of what specific administrative costs that covered. I laid out more papers, timelines, email threads, budget reports that didn't match. This pattern repeats across multiple grants and donations over the past 18 months, I continued. Money comes in designated for specific programs, but significantly more is allocated internally than the programs actually spend. The difference disappears into vague administrative categories with no detailed accounting. Catherine and Howard were taking rapid notes. Other board members had their phones out, pulling up their own files to verify what I was saying. Marcus tried to interrupt. This is completely inappropriate. These accusations. I'm not making accusations, I said calmly. I'm presenting documented discrepancies that someone should investigate. The room erupted in whispers. Board members huddled together, comparing notes. Some were already making phone calls. Marcus's face had gone from red to pale. He looked around desperately for support, but his usual allies were silent. Some of them were probably realizing their own names might be connected to what I was revealing. A board member I didn't recognize stood up. I move that we pause this presentation immediately and conduct an emergency internal audit. Seconded, Catherine said instantly. Howard looked at Marcus with cold eyes. I think you should step outside while we discuss this, Marcus. This is absurd, Marcus sputtered. You're going to believe this nobody over me? The word nobody hung in the air. It was the same dismissive tone he had used when he humiliated me. We're going to believe the documentation, Howard said firmly. Security, please escort Marcus Sterling from the room. I had never actually called security. I didn't need to. The board members had made that decision themselves once they saw the evidence. Marcus stared at me as security approached him. In his eyes, I saw the exact moment he understood everything. He realized I had been planning this. He realized I had given him exactly what he wanted. A quiet, defeated employee he could ignore, while I gathered everything I needed to destroy him. "You," he said, pointing at me. His hand was shaking. "You did this." I met his eyes calmly. "I just answered the questions I was asked, sir." Security took his arms gently but firmly. He didn't resist, but he kept staring at me as they let him out. The doors closed behind him, and the room exploded into conversation. Board members were demanding documents. Lawyers were being called. The press representatives were typing frantically on their phones. Catherine approached me. "How long have you known about these discrepancies?" "I started noticing inconsistencies about 4 months ago," I said truthfully. "I documented everything I found. Why didn't you report this immediately?" I chose my words carefully. After the incident at the last meeting, I wasn't sure anyone would listen to me. I wanted to make absolutely certain I had solid evidence before saying anything. She studied my face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Smart," she said quietly. The meeting ended early, but nobody left. People gathered in clusters, talking intensely. Some board members pulled me aside to ask more questions. I answered everything truthfully and calmly. Howard Phillips shook my hand. "You did the right thing bringing this forward. It took courage." I almost laughed at that. It hadn't taken courage. It had taken patience and careful planning. But I just nodded and said, "Thank you, sir." One of the donors, an elderly woman named Victoria Hayes, approached me with tears in her eyes. "I gave $20,000 to the scholarship fund," she said. "Was that money actually used for scholarships?" I pulled out another document and showed her. "Yes, ma'am. Your entire donation went exactly where you intended. I verified that personally." Her relief was visible. "Thank you," she whispered. I helped several other donors verify their contributions. Most of the money had been properly used. Marcus's scheme had targeted specific grants and corporate donations that were less likely to be tracked closely. By the end of the evening, I had given statements to 3 different board members and 2 lawyers. My throat was dry from talking. The investigation began immediately. Professional auditors were brought in. They requested access to every financial document from the past 3 years. I was asked to stay on as a consultant to help them navigate the department's filing systems. Suddenly, all that mindless filing work Marcus had assigned me became valuable. I knew exactly where every document was stored. "This is remarkably well organized," one auditor commented, looking through the files I had maintained. "Most organizations we audit are a mess." I didn't mention that I had spent months carefully organizing everything specifically for this moment. The auditors worked 12-hour days. I helped them find documents and explained the context for various transactions. They asked me hundreds of questions, and I answered each one precisely. Kyle Harrison, my former desk neighbor, stopped by my temporary office. "I can't believe this was happening the whole time," he said. "And you figured it out." "I just paid attention," I replied simply. He shook his head. "You did more than that. You outsmarted all of them." I didn't confirm or deny it. I just went back to helping the auditors. The investigation took 6 weeks. During that time, Marcus Sterling was suspended without pay. 2 other senior managers who had been part of the scheme were also suspended. The local news covered the story extensively. Reporters called me repeatedly, but I declined all interviews. I had said everything I needed to say in that boardroom. The documents spoke for themselves. The final audit report was damning. It confirmed everything I had presented and found additional irregularities I hadn't even known about. Nearly $200,000 had been misappropriated over 2 years. Criminal charges were filed. Marcus Sterling and his 2 accomplices were arrested. I watched the news coverage from my apartment. There was no satisfaction in seeing them led away in handcuffs. Just a quiet sense that justice had been done. The organization issued a public apology to all donors and implemented new financial oversight procedures. They promised complete transparency going forward. 3 days after the audit report was released, I received a call from Catherine Brooks. "Can you come to the office tomorrow morning? The board would like to speak with you." My stomach tightened slightly. I wasn't sure what to expect. The next morning, I arrived at the same conference room where I had been humiliated months earlier. The entire board was there, sitting in the same seats. Howard Phillips stood when I entered. "Please sit down." I sat in the chair at the head of the table, the one Marcus used to occupy. "We owe you an apology," Catherine began. "We should have noticed these problems ourselves. We should have created an environment where you felt safe reporting concerns immediately. We failed you." I stayed quiet, letting her continue. "We'd like to offer you Marcus Sterling's former position," Howard said. "Director of Operations. Full authority over the department, complete access to all financial systems, and a significant salary increase." I had not expected that. "I appreciate the offer," I said slowly. "But I need to think about it." They seemed surprised. "What concerns do you have?" Catherine asked. "I need to know that this organization has actually learned from what happened," I said carefully. "I need to know that if I take this position, I'll have real support from the board. That if I see problems, people will listen." Howard nodded seriously. "You have our word. We're implementing new policies specifically to prevent this from happening again. Regular independent audits, whistleblower protections, open-door policies with board members. And," Catherine added, "we want you to help design those policies. You understand the vulnerabilities better than anyone." I considered it for a long moment. This was what I had been working toward, but now that it was offered, I wanted to make sure it was real. "I'll accept on one condition," I finally said. "I want to hire my own team. People I trust. People who understand the importance of integrity and transparency." "Done," Howard said immediately. I allowed myself a small smile. "Then yes, I accept." Marcus Sterling's resignation was announced publicly the next day, along with my appointment as his replacement. The organization framed it carefully, focusing on their commitment to reform rather than the scandal itself. I didn't make any public statements. I let the organization's actions speak instead. Several former co-workers reached out to congratulate me. Some were genuine. Others were clearly trying to get back in my good graces after treating me poorly. Kyle Harrison was one of the genuine ones. "You deserve this," he said. "You earned it the hard way." Andrew, my brother, called me. For once, he sounded impressed. "Guess I was wrong about you not being able to handle corporate pressure." "Yeah," I said simply. "Guess you were." My mother cried when I told her. Happy tears this time. "I knew you were strong," she said. "I just didn't know how to help." My father actually put down his newspaper. "I'm proud of you," he said. Those 4 words meant more than I expected. Respect didn't return overnight. It came back slowly, carefully, as people watched to see what kind of leader I would be. I started by being completely transparent. I held open meetings where anyone could ask questions about department operations. I published monthly financial reports that anyone could access. I created anonymous feedback channels so people could raise concerns without fear. Some of the old guard resisted. They were used to the way Marcus had run things, with secrets and hierarchies and information hoarded as power. I replaced them with people who shared my values. I promoted the hard-working employees who had been overlooked. I hired new talent who brought fresh perspectives. Within 3 months, the entire culture of the department had shifted. People started collaborating instead of competing. Problems were solved quickly because people felt safe pointing them out. The board noticed. "You've transformed this place," Catherine told me during a review meeting. "Morale is higher than it's been in years." "I just created an environment where people can do their best work," I said. I never raised my voice during those months of transformation. I never publicly attacked Marcus or anyone else involved in the scandal. I never gloated about what I had uncovered or how I had planned it. I simply focused on doing the work correctly and treating people with the respect they deserved. When journalists occasionally asked about the scandal, I kept my answers brief. The investigation revealed serious problems. We've implemented new systems to prevent similar issues. We're focused on moving forward. I refused to be defined by what Marcus had done to me or by my revenge against him. I wanted to be defined by the positive changes we were making. Some people seemed disappointed that I wasn't more dramatic about it. They wanted public confrontations and scathing statements. But that had never been my goal. My goal was simple. Fix a broken system and create something better. 6 months into my new role, a young employee named Tyler Crawford came to my office. He looked nervous. "I think I found something wrong in the vendor contracts," he said quietly. "But I'm not sure, and I don't want to cause problems if I'm mistaken." I smiled at him. "Show me what you found." He was right. There was a problem. Not a major one, but enough that it needed to be addressed. "Good catch," I told him. "Thank you for bringing this to me." His relief was obvious. I wasn't sure if I should say anything. "I know I'm new here." "Never hesitate to point out problems," I said firmly. "That's how we stay honest. That's how we stay good at what we do." He nodded and left looking much more confident. Later I thought about how different my experience had been. When I had tried to do good work, I was humiliated. When Tyler found a problem, he was thanked. That difference was everything. That was what I had been fighting for all along. A year after the stakeholder meeting that changed everything, the organization held its annual gathering again. I stood at the same podium where Marcus had once humiliated me. The room was full. The same cameras recorded everything. But the atmosphere was completely different. "Thank you for coming," I began. "I'm excited to share what we've accomplished this year." I presented real numbers. Transparent budgets. Honest assessments of both our successes and our challenges. When I finished, people applauded. Not politely but genuinely. Howard Phillips stood up. "Before we end, I want to say something. A year ago, this organization was broken. We had lost our way. One person had the courage to speak up and hold us accountable. That took remarkable strength and integrity." He looked directly at me. "Thank you." The applause grew louder. Some people stood. I felt my eyes water slightly, but I kept my composure. "Thank you all," I said quietly. But this wasn't just me. It was everyone who chose to be honest, who chose to do better. That's what made the difference. People ask me sometimes how I stayed calm through everything that happened. How I endured the humiliation without breaking. How I planned my response without anyone noticing. I tell them the truth. I listened. When Marcus humiliated me publicly, I listened to what he and everyone else in that room really cared about. Power. Control. Appearances. So I gave them exactly what they wanted. I gave them a defeated employee who asked no questions and caused no problems. I gave them silence and submission. While they were comfortable thinking they had one, I listened more carefully. I watched more closely. I learned the truth they had tried to hide. They humiliated me publicly because they thought it would make me disappear. Instead, it made me invisible. And invisible people see everything. They got exactly what they wanted. A quiet, obedient employee who knew his place. But by giving them what they wanted, I took away everything they thought they controlled. Their power. Their secrets. Their carefully constructed lies. I didn't destroy them with anger or confrontation. I destroyed them with patience and truth. That's the lesson I carry with me now. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is give people exactly what they want, and wait for them to realize what they've actually gotten. Marcus wanted me silenced. He got silence. But that silence was gathering evidence. That silence was planning justice. That silence was stronger than all his shouting ever was. And in the end, the truth I had been quietly collecting spoke louder than any words I could have said. If this story resonated with you, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe to this channel for more true stories like this one. Leave a comment below, telling me what you would have done in my situation. I read every single one. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Your share might save someone's life. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. I know this wasn't an easy story to hear, and I want to be honest with you, some of the stories that follow contain fictionalized elements created for educational purposes. If that's not something you're comfortable with, feel free to explore other content that suits you better. But if you're willing to learn from real experiences, even painful ones, I'll be here sharing what I've learned. God bless you. And remember, protecting what is yours is never an option.